3D animation is without a doubt one of the most taxing tasks you can put a computer through. Dense geometry, scenes with shadows and reflections, special effects like explosions or smoke, each can easily bring even the fastest machine down to its knees in no time. And when a machine slows down, you slow down, and nobody ever likes that. So when working in Max, it's vital that you think as smart as possible, doing whatever you can to lighten your load when you can. You gotta always keep in mind that no matter how big and bad your computer is, there's only so much processor speed and system memory, or RAM, to go around. And believe me, you'll know when you start running low on resources. The screen redraws slower, your renders take longer, heck, even saving and opening files feels sluggish. Bottom line, whatever you do will become harder to accomplish. It'd be like pedaling a bike uphill with a 100-pound backpack strapped to your shoulders. If you were able to throw that extra load off to the side, think how much easier it would be getting to the top of the grade. Well, Max works pretty much the same way. The more you strap on its back, the more you push down its throat, the tougher and slower the production process becomes. So the question is, what can you do to lighten the load? Something you ought to be asking yourself in working in any project. Let's talk about some of those things. Each of the lines you see on the teapot is referred to as a segment. And those segments control not just how blocky or smooth an object looks, more segments making the object appear smoother, but they also determine just how hard the computer has to work in order to make those computations. So the more lines, the heavier the workload. Some projects require that your objects have not just hundreds, but sometimes thousands of those little white lines. A character that would be seen close up in a feature film would be a perfect example. A high segment count would ensure that the character's surface would not just look smooth, but also deform in a more realistic way. You'll find other applications, like maybe creating a real-time video game, where the line count must be kept to a minimum in order to keep the gameplay from appearing choppy. A heavy model in situations like that would be disastrous, although geometry weight isn't quite as big a deal these days with the advances that have been made in playback hardware. What this all means is you gotta realize that different applications, different jobs if you will have different requirements. Even with that though, it's going to be important that you always try to think and build as light as possible. Adding precision and detail where needed, but always trying to do so with the least amount of overhead in order for both you and the computer to work as efficiently as possible. As it pertains to working in your views, you can optimize your effort and system resources by not having all of your windows always displaying in what is referred to as shaded or realistic mode. Now, this is how Max displays the objects in your scene when using the settings as they were set coming out of the factory. Notice how Max displays only a single view in that shaded display, the other three windows being shown in what is called wireframe mode. Now, why do you think Max, by default, sets things up that way? Well, that's easy. There's less to calculate, there's less to slow things down. You gotta believe you're pushing your video card harder when you ask your software for a prettier, more detailed picture in each view. Now with a simple scene like this, it's not a big deal. But you start building more complex scenes, and I promise you're gonna start seeing things slow down, and sometimes in a big-time way. So if you can control that stuff, and you can, you gotta think ahead, work more efficiently, building objects smarter, trying to cut down or cut back when and wherever you can. It's just a good habit to get into. You keep Max happy, and you'll find yourself buzzing through your workflow much quicker. Now there's other things you can control as you build your scenes. One is when lighting your scene, use shadow casting lights where needed, but don't go crazy. Every light in your scene doesn't need to be throwing down a shadow. Secondly, adding a bumpy or reflective surface to an object will slow things down. Now, sometimes you can't get around those rough textures and accurate reflections, but at other times, especially when things are a little farther away from the camera, you gotta be asking yourself whether you can even see those added surface elements. If you can't, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be adding them in. And one of the biggest slowdowns you can force into your production pipeline is adding special effects. Things like explosions and smoke and fire. Now again, I'm not saying don't use them, but as you get more experience, you'll learn that sometimes those effects can be created with pictures and not necessarily geometry. So a few different things to keep in mind as you mull over some of the stuff you can do to help Max help you as you work on your projects. Many times those reductions can't be made. You just gotta swallow hard and take your lumps, expecting there to be a slowdown. But most of the time, there's going to be at least a few things you can do that'll optimize your speed and efficiency. Things you can definitely think about and plan on doing whenever you can.